Captain Ji-won Park stared at the broken screens in Luna Command and felt the weight of humanity's defeat crushing down on her shoulders. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442, and the numbers still made her sick. 80% of Earth's space fleet was gone, and the bodies of 3 million human soldiers floated in the cold darkness between the stars. The Vorthak Empire had torn through humanity's best ships like they were made of paper, and now their massive war fleet was coming for Earth itself. She touched the burn scar on her left cheek and remembered the moment her destroyer had exploded around her. The escape pod had barely made it to safety before the ship became a ball of fire in space. Most of her crew had not been so lucky. Their names were now on the long list of the dead that covered the walls of every military base in the solar system. The door to the command center slid open with a soft hiss, and Commander Minho Lee walked in carrying a data pad. His face looked tired and older than his 35 years. Dark circles under his eyes showed he had not slept well in weeks. As Earth's chief military strategist, he had been working day and night to find some way to save their world from the coming invasion. "The latest intelligence reports are in," he said, and set the datapad on the metal table between them. "The news is not good." G1 picked up the device and scrolled through the information. The Vorthak fleet had over 3,000 ships heading toward Earth. Each one was bigger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons could crack a moon in half, and their shields could stop anything the human military could throw at them. Against this armada, Earth could barely put together 200 working ships, and most of those were damaged from the last battle. "How long do we have?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would not give her any comfort. 6 weeks, maybe 7 if they stop to destroy our outer colonies first," Minho replied. He sat down heavily in a chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "The math is simple. We cannot win a straight fight against them. Even if every shot we fired hit its target, and every shot they fired missed, we would still lose." Ji-won had run the same calculations herself. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems in the past century. They were a race that lived for war and had turned fighting into an art form. Their soldiers were trained from birth to kill, and their technology was hundreds of years ahead of human science. Earth had only one advantage, and it was not enough to matter. Humans were better at thinking outside the box, but that creativity meant nothing when facing overwhelming firepower. The communications system crackled to life and filled the room with static. A voice came through the speakers requesting permission to enter the command center. Ji-won recognized it as Dr. Yuna Kim, the xenopsychologist who had been studying the Vorthak for the past 5 years. She was one of the few people on Earth who understood how the alien mind worked. "Come in, Doctor," Ji-won called out. The door opened, and Yuna stepped inside. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and graying hair that she kept tied back in a simple ponytail. In her hands, she carried a thick folder filled with papers and data chips. Her expression was serious, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. It looked almost like hope. "I have been studying the intercepted Vorthak communications from the battle," she said without any greeting. "I think I may have found something important." Minho looked up with interest. Any new information about their enemy was valuable, even if it only helped them understand how they were going to die. "What did you discover?" Yuna opened her folder and pulled out several sheets of paper covered with alien writing and human translations. "The Vorthak culture is built entirely around the concept of military honor. They worship strength and despise weakness in all its forms. Their entire society is organized like an army with the strongest warriors at the top and the weakest at the bottom." "We already knew that," Ji-won said, though she tried to keep the frustration out of her voice. "The doctor was brilliant, but sometimes she took too long to get to the point." "Yes, but what we did not understand is how this affects their tactical thinking," Yuna continued. "The Vorthak have never encountered a species that would hide their true strength. In their minds, if you have a powerful weapon, you display it proudly to show your enemies what they face. The idea of appearing weak when you are actually strong is completely foreign to them." She pulled out another sheet that showed a diagram of Vorthak battle formations. "Look at how they arrange their fleets. The biggest and most powerful ships are always in front where everyone can see them. They want their enemies to know exactly how outmatched they are. It is part of their psychological warfare." Minho leaned forward and studied the diagrams. So they expect us to do the same thing? They think we will throw everything we have at them in one desperate attack. Exactly, Yuna said, and her eyes brightened. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on facing enemies who fight with honor according to Vorthak rules. They plan for opponents who will show their maximum strength from the beginning of battle. The three of them sat in silence for several minutes as the implications of this discovery sank in. Jiwon felt her mind racing as she considered the possibilities. What if humanity did not fight according to Vorthak expectations? What if they deliberately appeared even weaker than they actually were? The command center door opened again and Admiral Hyun Cho entered the room. He was an old soldier with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. His uniform was crisp and clean, but his face showed the strain of leading a military that was facing impossible odds. Behind him walked several other senior officers, including Colonel Daeho Song and Lieutenant Gi-hyun Nam. I called this meeting because we need to discuss our final strategy, Admiral Cho said as he took his place at the head of the table. The President has asked for our recommendations on how to defend Earth. I want to hear all options, even the ones that seem impossible. Ji-won looked at Yuna and then at the other officers around the table. An idea was forming in her mind, but it was so crazy that she almost did not want to say it out loud. What if we do not try to appear stronger than we are? She said slowly. What if we try to appear weaker? Colonel Song raised an eyebrow. Explain that, Captain. Dr. Kim has discovered that the Vorthak cannot understand the concept of hiding strength, Ji-won continued. They expect us to show them everything we have. What if we convinced them that we had even less than they think? Admiral Cho stroked his chin thoughtfully. You are talking about deception on a massive scale, making them believe we are completely helpless. Not completely helpless, Minho said as he began to understand the plan. Just helpless enough that they do not bring their entire fleet. If we could make them think we were so weak that only a small force was needed to finish us off, they might split their fleet or send ships to other targets, Lieutenant Nam added. 3,000 ships are impossible to fight, but 300 might be manageable, Yuna nodded enthusiastically. It could work. The Vorthak psychology is perfect for this kind of manipulation. They have never faced an enemy who would willingly appear weak. It goes against everything they believe about proper warfare. Admiral Cho stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the lunar surface. In the distance, Earth hung like a blue and white jewel against the black of space. You are asking me to bet the survival of our entire species on a psychological trick. We are already betting our survival, Ji-won replied. The only question is whether we bet on a hopeless fight or on the possibility that we can outsmart them. The Admiral turned back to face the group. His expression was grim but determined. If we do this, there is no going back. Once we start the deception, we have to commit completely. Any mistake will expose the truth, and then we face their full strength anyway. The alternative is certain death, Colonel Song said quietly. At least this gives us a chance. Admiral Cho nodded slowly. Then we will try it. Dr. Kim, I want you to design a psychological profile that tells us exactly how to make them underestimate us. Commander Lee, work on the tactical details of how we hide our true capabilities. Captain Park, you will coordinate with our remaining fleet commanders to make sure everyone understands their role. As the meeting broke up and the officers filed out of the room, Ji-won felt something she had not experienced since the defeat at Kepler 442. It was not quite hope, but it was not despair either. For the first time in 3 months, humanity had a plan that did not end with their complete destruction. It was a desperate plan based on lies and misdirection, but it was still a plan. She looked out at Earth one more time and made a silent promise. The Vorthak thought they understood humanity, but they were about to learn that humans were full of surprises. The coming battle would not be won with bigger guns or stronger shields. It would be won with the one thing humans did better than any other species in the galaxy. They would win by refusing to play by the rules. 6 weeks before the Vorthak fleet would reach Earth, the greatest military deception in human history began. Operation Silent Thunder was not about building weapons or training soldiers. It was about teaching an entire civilization how to lie, convincingly enough to save their own lives. Dr. Yuna Kim sat in her new office deep inside the Luna Command bunker, surrounded by screens showing Vorthak communication intercepts. For the past week, she had been working with Colonel Daeho Song to create what they called the Performance Manual. It was a detailed guide that explained exactly how humanity needed to act to convince their enemies that Earth was already defeated. The key is to make them believe we are in complete panic, she explained to the assembled fleet commanders who had gathered for the secret briefing. Every message we send, every action we take must support the story that human civilization is collapsing from the inside. Captain Jiwon Park studied the documents spread across the conference table. Each page contained scripts for fake communications and detailed instructions for how ship captains should behave when Vorthak scouts were watching. This feels wrong, she admitted. We are trained to show strength in the face of the enemy, not to run away like frightened children. That training is exactly why this will work, Colonel Song replied. The Vorthak think the same way we do. They cannot imagine that a military force would deliberately appear cowardly. To them, cowardice and weakness are the same thing. The plan was more complex than simply acting scared. Every aspect of human military behavior had to be carefully staged to create the right impression. Ships would break formation and scatter when Vorthak scouts appeared. Radio communications would be filled with reports of desertion and equipment failure. Most importantly, the remaining human fleet would be spread out across the solar system to look like desperate refugees instead of an organized fighting force. Engineer Soman Bey had been given one of the most important jobs in the operation. Her teams were working around the clock to build what she called ghost ships. These were massive vessels that looked like civilian evacuation transports, but were actually empty shells filled with computers and holographic projectors. From the outside, they appeared to be packed with fleeing families. Vorthak scanners would detect life signs and energy readings that suggested millions of panicked humans were abandoning Earth. Each ghost ship needs to tell a story, Soman explained to her engineering crews. The Vorthak must believe they are seeing terrified civilians running for their lives. Every detail matters, from the heat signatures to the communication chatter. The ghost ships were marvels of human creativity and desperation. Inside their hollow hulls, sophisticated computer systems generated fake life signs and simulated the energy patterns of crowded refugee transports. Automated systems would broadcast distress calls and pleas for help that painted a picture of complete social breakdown. When Vorthak forces inevitably intercepted these ships, they would find exactly what they expected to see. Lieutenant Gi-hyun Nam coordinated the intelligence side of the deception. His job was to make sure the Vorthak received false information from multiple sources that all told the same story. Human colonies throughout the outer systems began sending reports of government collapse and military units abandoning their posts. Resistance cells that had been fighting the Vorthak advance suddenly started surrendering without firing a shot. The beautiful thing about this plan is that the Vorthak are helping us sell it, Nam explained to his intelligence officers. Their own scouts are confirming what we want them to believe. When they see our ships running away, they think it proves we are beaten. Every fake surrender and staged retreat was carefully planned to reinforce Vorthak assumptions about human weakness. Colonies that could have held out for months instead broadcast messages begging for mercy. Military commanders who had never lost a battle in their lives recorded videos explaining why they were giving up. The aliens intercepted these communications and passed them up their chain of command as proof that humanity was finished. The hardest part was convincing human soldiers to participate in something that went against every instinct they had. Admiral Hyun Cho spent hours meeting with ship captains and unit commanders, explaining why they needed to act like cowards. I know this feels like betraying everything we stand for, he told them, but right now, appearing weak is the strongest thing we can do. Some officers refused to participate and had to be quietly reassigned to other duties. Others threw themselves into their roles with enthusiasm once they understood the larger strategy. Captain Park found herself practicing how to sound panicked and defeated in radio communications. It was harder than any military training she had ever done. The deception began to show results within 2 weeks. Vorthak intelligence reports that human spies intercepted showed the aliens were reassessing their invasion plans. Instead of bringing their entire fleet to crush Earth, they were considering reducing their force size. Why waste ships on an enemy that had already given up fighting? They are taking the bait, Dr. Kim announced during one of the daily strategy meetings. Vorthak commanders are arguing that a full invasion fleet is unnecessary. Some are suggesting They only need 1,000 ships to finish off what remains of human resistance. 1,000 ships were still enough to destroy everything humanity had built, but it was progress. Every ship the Vorthak sent somewhere else was one less gun pointed at Earth. The deception needed to be taken further to reduce those numbers even more. Colonel Song proposed the next phase of the operation. We need to give them a reason to split their forces, something that will draw part of their fleet away from Earth while still making us look helpless. The solution came from an unexpected source. Engineer Bay suggested they could create the appearance of a secret human weapon that was both powerful enough to threaten the Vorthak and pathetic enough to fit their image of human desperation. What if we convinced them that Earth was building some kind of doomsday device, she proposed. Something so dangerous that they would have to send ships to stop it, but so obviously desperate that it proved we had no other options. The fake superweapon project became the centerpiece of the next stage of deception. Human engineers began construction of what appeared to be a massive energy cannon on Mars. In reality, it was nothing more than an elaborate holographic projector surrounded by fake equipment and actors playing the roles of scientists. But to Vorthak observers, it looked like humanity was pouring their last resources into building a weapon of desperation. Leaked intelligence reports described the Mars weapon as humanity's final gamble. The fake documents explained that the device could theoretically damage several Vorthak ships, but would take days to charge, and could only be fired once before burning itself out. It was exactly the kind of desperate last resort that fit Vorthak expectations of human behavior. Perfect, Dr. Kim said when she reviewed the fake intelligence. It makes us look both dangerous enough to require attention and pathetic enough to confirm their beliefs about our weakness. The Vorthak response was exactly what the humans had hoped for. Intelligence intercepts showed that alien commanders were planning to split their invasion fleet. Half would blockade Mars to prevent the superweapon from being completed, while the other half would finish destroying Earth's defenses. Instead of facing 3,000 ships, humanity would now face 1,500 in two separate battles. 1,500 ships were still overwhelming odds, but they were odds that human forces might possibly survive. More importantly, the deception was working so well that the Vorthak were making tactical decisions based on completely false information. They were walking into a trap without realizing it. Captain Park stood on the bridge of her new command ship and watched the latest batch of ghost ships launch toward the outer planets. To any observer, they looked like desperate civilians fleeing a doomed world. In reality, they were the most sophisticated weapons of psychological warfare ever created. Each empty vessel carried the hopes of an entire species. Status report, she called out to her bridge crew. All ghost ships are broadcasting properly, her communications officer reported. Vorthak scouts are tracking them as expected. Engineering. Teams report the Mars hologram is operational, added her tactical officer. From orbit, it looks exactly like a half-built superweapon. Park nodded and turned her attention to the main display screen. It showed the positions of human and Vorthak forces throughout the solar system. The alien fleet was still weeks away, but their scout ships were already gathering intelligence and making decisions based on what they observed. Every piece of false information they collected brought humanity one step closer to survival. Continue. The performance, she ordered. Make sure every communication sounds appropriately desperate. The moment we stop acting defeated is the moment this entire plan falls apart. The deception had become a way of life for the entire human military. Officers who had built their careers on displaying courage and competence now spent their days practicing how to sound weak and frightened. It was perhaps the hardest thing any of them had ever been asked to do, but they did it because the alternative was extinction. As she watched the displays showing their elaborate charade, Park allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The Vorthak fleet entered the outer solar system like a storm of metal and fire. 900 warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the sun. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering built for conquest and designed to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. General Kravesh stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The humans were behaving exactly as his intelligence reports had predicted. Captain Jiwon Park received the alert while sitting in the command center of Luna Base. The enemy had finally arrived, and the greatest test of human deception was about to begin. She activated the communication system and began broadcasting the first of many surrender offers that would be sent over the coming days. Her voice trembled with carefully practiced fear as she spoke about humanity's desire to avoid further bloodshed. "Please, respond to our communication requests," she transmitted on frequencies she knew the Vorthak were monitoring. "Earth Command is prepared to discuss terms of surrender. We do not wish to see more human lives lost in a hopeless cause." The messages were part of Dr. Yuna Kim's psychological warfare plan. Each transmission was designed to reinforce Vorthak beliefs about human weakness while secretly gathering intelligence about alien communication systems. Every time the Vorthak responded, they revealed information about their command structure and tactical thinking. Engineer Soman Bay monitored her ghost ships from a hidden control center deep beneath Luna's surface. The massive fake evacuation vessels were performing exactly as designed. Vorthak scanners detected thousands of life signs aboard each ship and intercepted desperate communications from families begging for protection. The alien commanders saw a broken civilization fleeing in panic and never suspected they were looking at empty hulls filled with advanced computer systems. "Ghost Ship 7 is being approached by a Vorthak patrol," her technical officer reported. "They are requesting permission to come aboard and inspect our cargo." "Granted," Bay replied. "Initiate evacuation protocol and activate the holographic C. Passengers." The ghost ship's computers immediately began broadcasting emergency signals, claiming that reactor problems were forcing the crew to abandon ship. The Vorthak patrol watched as escape pods launched from the vessel and scattered in different directions. When they boarded the apparently empty transport, they found exactly what they expected to see: corridors that had recently held terrified families and cargo bays still warm from the presence of thousands of refugees. What they did not realize was that everything they observed was created by sophisticated holographic projectors and environmental control systems. The ghost ship had never carried a single human passenger, but the evidence of recent occupation was perfect in every detail. The Vorthak boarding party filed a report confirming that the humans were indeed fleeing the solar system in large numbers. Lieutenant Gi-hyun Nam coordinated a series of fake military operations designed to make human forces appear even more incompetent than the Vorthak already believed. His pilots flew outdated fighters in deliberately clumsy attack patterns that made it easy for alien gunners to shoot them down. Each failed ambush was carefully planned to look like the desperate actions of an army that had already lost hope. Red. "Squadron is approaching the target zone," Nam reported from his command post. "Remember, people, this attack needs to fail spectacularly, but also needs to look like we really tried to succeed." The human fighters launched their assault against a Vorthak supply convoy with weapons that appeared to malfunction at critical moments. Their formation broke apart under enemy fire, and several ships were forced to retreat with fake engine damage. To the Vorthak observers, it looked like another example of human military incompetence. In reality, every aspect of the battle had been choreographed to gather detailed intelligence about alien ship designs and defensive systems. The most dangerous part of the deception involved Colonel Daeho Song's reconnaissance mission. His orders were to allow himself to be captured by Vorthak forces while carrying false intelligence about human military capabilities. It was a mission that required him to risk his life for information that might never be used. Song flew his scout ship into a known Vorthak patrol zone and waited for the inevitable interception. When alien fighters surrounded his vessel, he transmitted surrender signals and powered down his weapons. The Vorthak took him aboard their cruiser and immediately began interrogation procedures that had broken the will of countless prisoners from other conquered worlds. "I am Colonel Daeho Song of the Earth Defense Force," he told his captors. "I demand to be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Prisoner Rights." The Vorthak interrogator was a massive creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had evolved from predators, and their natural intimidation tactics had proven effective against most other races. "You are in no position to make demands human. Tell us about your military strength and perhaps your death will be quick." Song had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every piece of information he revealed was carefully crafted to support the larger deception while appearing to be extracted under torture. "You want to know about our defenses," he said after what appeared to be hours of resistance. "Fine, I will tell you, but it will not help you. He described Earth's orbital defense platforms as ancient weapons that barely functioned and could be destroyed by any serious attack. He spoke of human ships that were held together with spare parts and determination rather than proper military engineering. Most importantly, he told them about the secret weapon being built on Mars. It is called the Nova Cannon, he explained with what appeared to be bitter resignation. High Command thinks it can damage your fleet, but they are fools. The weapon requires 3 days to charge its power cells and can only fire once before. The entire system burns out. Even if it works perfectly, it might destroy 2 or 3 of your ships before you overwhelm our defenses. The information was exactly what Vorthak strategists wanted to hear. It confirmed their assessment of human weakness while revealing a potential threat that needed to be neutralized. Song's apparent reluctance to share the details made the intelligence seem more credible than if he had volunteered it freely. General Kravesh reviewed the interrogation reports and made the decision that would determine the outcome of the coming battle. "We will divide our forces," he announced to his senior commanders. "Half the fleet will blockade Mars to prevent the humans from completing their desperate weapon. The other half will proceed to Earth and finish destroying their remaining defenses, Doctor." Kim monitored Vorthak communications from her intelligence post and felt a mixture of relief and terror as she heard the alien plans. The deception was working perfectly, but now came the truly dangerous part. Humanity would have to face 2 separate battles against forces that still outnumbered them significantly. "They are splitting the fleet as predicted," she reported to Admiral Hyun Cho. 450 ships are heading for Mars, and 450 are continuing toward Earth. The Admiral nodded grimly. "Then it is time to reveal what we have really been hiding." For months, human engineers had been working in secret to prepare for this moment. Every ship in Earth's remaining fleet carried weapons and defensive systems that appeared decades out of date, but were actually more advanced than anything the Vorthak had encountered. The humans had learned to disguise their technology to look primitive while incorporating improvements that their enemies could not imagine. Captain Park stood on the bridge of her command ship and felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. The vessel around her looked like a relic from an earlier era of spaceflight. Its hull was scarred and patched, and its weapons appeared to be simple projectile cannons. In reality, the ship carried quantum shields, experimental antimatter torpedoes, and an artificial intelligence system that could predict enemy movements with frightening accuracy. "All stations report ready," her tactical officer announced. "The fleet is in position and waiting for your signal." Park looked at the display showing Vorthak forces approaching Earth's outer defenses. For 3 months, humanity had performed the role of a beaten enemy fleeing in terror. The aliens had believed every lie and fallen for every trick. Now it was time to show them what humans could really do when they stopped pretending to be helpless. "Signal all ships," she ordered. Operation Silent Thunder enters its final phase. It is time to stop acting weak and start being strong. The message went out to every human vessel in the solar system. On Mars, the fake superweapon suddenly revealed itself to be a sophisticated holographic projection. The desperate refugees, fleeing toward the outer planets, stopped running and began powering up weapons that should not have existed on civilian transports. Most importantly, the scattered remnants of Earth's fleet began moving with a coordination and purpose that shocked their alien observers. General Kravesh stared at his tactical displays in confusion as the human forces revealed their true nature. Ships that his intelligence had dismissed as obsolete relics were generating energy readings that exceeded anything in the Vorthak database. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our reports indicated they were using primitive technology." The Battle of Sol began when the first Vorthak dreadnought opened fire on what appeared to be a defenseless human orbital station. The massive alien warship launched a barrage of plasma torpedoes that should have reduced the station to glowing debris. Instead, the ancient-looking structure suddenly blazed with energy as quantum shields activated and deflected the attack harmlessly into space. Captain Jiwon Park watched from the command center of New Seoul Station as her carefully maintained illusion finally shattered. For months, the orbital platform had appeared to be a barely functional relic held together with emergency repairs and desperate hope. The Vorthak had dismissed it as a pathetic symbol of human weakness. They were about to learn how wrong their assumptions had been. All defensive systems online, her tactical officer reported. Quantum barriers are holding at full strength, and weapon batteries are locked onto multiple targets. Return fire, Park ordered. Show them what a primitive human station can really do. The station's main guns revealed themselves as they emerged from hidden compartments built into the hull. What the Vorthak had thought were simple metal plates were actually sophisticated camouflage systems that had concealed some of the most advanced weapons in human space. Antimatter charges streaked across the void and struck the alien dreadnoughts, shields with devastating force. General Kravesh stared in shock as his flagship shuddered under the impact of weapons that should not have existed. Impossible, he growled. Our intelligence reports showed their technology was centuries behind ours. His tactical officer struggled to make sense of the sensor readings flooding his displays. Sir, the energy output from that station exceeds anything in our database. Their weapons are using some form of matter-antimatter reaction that we have never encountered before. Across the solar system, similar scenes of confusion and alarm were playing out throughout the Vorthak fleet. Every human ship that had appeared to be fleeing in panic suddenly stopped running and revealed its true nature. Engineer Soman Bey's ghost ships dropped their holographic disguises and transformed into heavily armed battle platforms. The vessels that had seemed to carry desperate refugees were actually mobile weapons factories equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. Ghost ship formations, Alpha through Delta, are engaging enemy squadrons, Bey reported, from her control center. All systems are functioning within normal parameters, and the Vorthak appear to be completely unprepared for our actual capabilities. The fake evacuation vessels had been designed to do more than just fool alien scouts. Hidden beneath their civilian exteriors were manufacturing systems that could produce weapons and equipment in real time during battle. As the fight progressed, these ships began launching swarms of automated fighters and missile pods that vastly outnumbered anything the Vorthak had expected to face. Lieutenant Gi-hyun Nam led his squadrons in the final revelation of human deception. The pilots who had spent months appearing incompetent and cowardly suddenly began flying with a skill and coordination that left their enemies stunned. Their fighters were not the obsolete relics they appeared to be, but cutting-edge machines, equipped with experimental technology that made them nearly impossible to target. Red Squadron engaging enemy interceptors, Nam reported as his fighters slipped through Vorthak defensive formations like ghosts. Phase shift systems are working perfectly. The aliens cannot get a lock on us. The human fighters used technology that bent light and energy around their hulls, making them appear to be in different locations than where they actually were. Vorthak gunners found themselves shooting at targets that vanished the moment they pulled their triggers. Meanwhile, the human pilots delivered precise strikes against critical systems on alien ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before. Dr. Yuna Kim monitored the battle from her intelligence post and felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern as her psychological profile of the Vorthak proved devastatingly accurate. The aliens were reacting exactly as she had predicted they would, when faced with an enemy that had deliberately appeared weaker than they actually were. Their command structure is breaking down, she reported to Admiral Hyun Cho. Vorthak commanders are trained to fight opponents who display their maximum strength from the beginning of battle. They have no tactical doctrine for dealing with enemies, who reveal new capabilities during combat. The Vorthak military philosophy that had served them well during decades of conquest was now working against them. Their rigid adherence to displaying overwhelming force meant they had never developed strategies for adapting to unexpected threats. When human ships began demonstrating technology that exceeded their own, the alien commanders found themselves paralyzed by indecision. On Mars, the second half of the Vorthak fleet was discovering that the human superweapon they had come to destroy was nothing more than an elaborate holographic projection. 450 alien warships had positioned themselves to attack a target that existed only in their computers. Meanwhile, Admiral Hyun Cho's real fleet emerged from hiding places throughout the asteroid belt and began surrounding the confused Vorthak forces. "This is Admiral Cho to all human vessels," the old soldier announced over the communication system. "The enemy has divided their forces and fallen for our deception. Execute Operation Hammerfall. Show them the price of underestimating humanity." The human ships that attacked the Mars fleet were not the desperate refugees the Vorthak expected, but a carefully prepared battle group equipped with the most advanced weapons Earth had ever produced. Their hulls might have looked like patched-together relics, but their firepower rivaled anything the aliens could bring to bear. Colonel Deho. Song had spent weeks in Vorthak captivity feeding false information to his interrogators. Every technical specification he had provided was carefully crafted to mislead alien engineers about human capabilities. When Vorthak ships tried to exploit the weaknesses he had described, they instead exposed their own vulnerabilities to human targeting systems. The prisoner's intelligence was completely false, General Kravesh's science officer reported as their ships began taking heavy casualties. None of the human weaknesses he described actually exist. Our tactical computers are predicting target points that do not correspond to their real defensive systems. The Vorthak had built their attack strategies around intelligence that portrayed human ships as fragile and poorly defended. Instead, they found themselves facing vessels with multiple redundant systems and armor that could absorb devastating amounts of damage. Every shot that should have crippled a human warship was deflected or absorbed by defensive technology that exceeded alien understanding. Captain Park coordinated the Earth defense from her command station and felt a fierce pride as she watched humanity's true strength revealed at last. The species that had appeared to be fleeing in terror was instead demonstrating a level of technological sophistication that shocked their would-be conquerors. Status report from all sectors, she requested. Sector 7 reports successful engagement. Of Vorthak Battle Group 3, her communications officer replied. Enemy casualties are running at 60% with minimal losses on our side. Sector 12 confirms destruction of the alien flagship Terror of Worlds, added her tactical officer. The remaining Vorthak vessels in that area are attempting to retreat. The battle that the Vorthak had expected to be a simple extermination operation was becoming a rout. Human forces that had appeared helpless were systematically destroying alien ships with weapons and tactics that defied every assumption the invaders had made about their opponents. General Kravesh found himself commanding a fleet that was being torn apart by an enemy he did not understand. His ships were designed to fight opponents who followed the same military principles as the Vorthak. They were not prepared to face humans who had spent months studying alien weaknesses while hiding their own strengths. Signal a general retreat, he finally ordered, as another of his dreadnoughts exploded under human fire. We cannot continue this battle without understanding how their technology works. But retreat was not going to be as simple as the general hoped. The human fleet had been positioned to cut off Vorthak escape routes and their faster-than-light communication systems. Were jamming alien attempts to call for reinforcements. The invaders who had come to conquer Earth found themselves trapped in a solar system controlled by an enemy they had completely underestimated. Dr. Kim studied the tactical displays and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The psychological warfare campaign had worked better than she had dared to hope. The Vorthak were not just losing the battle, but losing their understanding of how warfare itself was supposed to work. They are completely demoralized, she reported. Our deception has not just given us tactical advantages, but has broken their confidence in their own military doctrine. The Battle of Sol was becoming more than just a human victory. It was a demonstration that the galaxy's most powerful military force could be defeated by an enemy willing to abandon conventional thinking and embrace new approaches to warfare. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems by overwhelming their opponents with superior firepower. They had never faced an enemy that would deliberately appear weak in order to become strong. The Battle of Sol ended not with a glorious charge or desperate last stand, but with the systematic destruction of an enemy fleet that had lost all understanding of what they were fighting. General Kravesh's flagship burned in the cold vacuum of space, while escape pods scattered like seeds in the wind. The Vorthak Empire's most powerful invasion force had been reduced to scattered survivors, fleeing a solar system they had expected to conquer with ease. Captain Jiwon Park stood in the observation deck of New Seoul Station and watched the final alien dreadnought explode in a ball of superheated plasma. The massive warship had been the pride of the Vorthak fleet and symbol of their military might. Now, it was nothing more than glowing debris drifting past the orbit of Mars. Around her, the station crews worked to maintain their careful performance even in victory. Continue broadcasting surrender requests, she ordered her communications officer. The deception does not end just because we won the battle. This was perhaps the most crucial moment of the entire operation. The surviving Vorthak vessels were transmitting everything they had learned back to the Empire. If humanity appeared too victorious or revealed too much about their true capabilities, the aliens would realize they had been deceived. The next invasion, fleet would come prepared for the real strength of human forces. Dr. Yuna Kim monitored the alien communications from her intelligence post and felt the weight of success mixed with new dangers. The psychological profile she had created for the Vorthak was still working, but now it needed to serve a different purpose. Instead of making the aliens underestimate human strength, it needed to make them continue underestimating human capabilities even after witnessing their defeat. The Vorthak survivors are reporting that Earth forces got lucky, she announced to the command staff. They believe human technology malfunctioned in ways that accidentally created powerful weapons. According to their analysis, we barely survived. The battle and our equipment will not work the same way twice. The aliens were interpreting their defeat through the lens of their own expectations about human incompetence. They could not accept that a primitive species had deliberately tricked them, so they convinced themselves that random equipment failures had temporarily given Earth an advantage. It was exactly the kind of thinking that would allow the deception to continue. Engineer Soman Bey supervised the careful dismantling of her ghost ships and the restoration of their civilian disguises. The massive vessels that had revealed themselves as advanced weapons platforms now needed to return to looking like desperate refugee transports. Every trace of military equipment had to be hidden or removed before alien observers could study the technology too closely. Begin Phase 2 reconstruction, she ordered her engineering teams. I want these ships to look exactly like civilian evacuation vessels again within 6 hours. If the Vorthak send investigators, they need to find evidence that supports the malfunction theory. The human crews worked with practiced efficiency to restore the illusion that had saved their species. Weapons systems were retracted into hidden compartments, and holographic projectors were repositioned to create the appearance of crowded passenger areas. By the time Vorthak rescue ships arrived to collect their survivors, they would find exactly what their preconceptions told them to expect. Lieutenant Gi-hyun Nam led his pilots in one final performance as they escorted alien escape pods toward the edge of the solar system. The human fighters that had demonstrated impossible maneuverability during the battle now appeared to be limping home with battle damage and failing systems. Their pilots broadcast messages about equipment that had worked beyond specifications and would need months of repair before functioning again. Remember, people, we barely survived this fight, Nam reminded his squadron over the radio. Our ships got lucky, but the technology is unreliable, and most of our systems are burned out. Act exhausted and grateful to be alive. The performance was convincing because it contained elements of truth mixed with carefully crafted lies. The human pilots were exhausted after months of preparation and the strain of battle. Their ships did need maintenance and repair, though not for the reasons they claimed. The aliens intercepting their communications heard exactly what they expected from a primitive military force that had accidentally stumbled into victory. Colonel Daeho Song was finally rescued from Vorthak captivity when alien forces abandoned their command ship. His weeks of imprisonment had been part of the deception, but the physical and mental strain had been real. As human medical teams treated his injuries, he continued to play his role as a broken officer who had revealed military secrets under torture. The intelligence I gave them was accurate, he reported to Admiral Hyun Cho with carefully practiced despair. I told them about our defensive weaknesses and the locations of our remaining ships. The only reason we survived is that their own equipment malfunctioned when they tried to exploit the information. Song's performance was critical to selling the final layer of deception. The Vorthak needed to believe that their intelligence had been correct, and their defeat was due to technical failures rather than strategic deception. His apparent guilt and confusion supported the alien theory that random equipment malfunctions had saved Earth from certain destruction. Admiral Hyun Cho reviewed the battle reports and felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern about the future. Operation Silent Thunder had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, but victory brought new challenges. The Vorthak Empire would eventually send another fleet, and humanity needed to be prepared for enemies who might not fall for the same tricks. Twice. Dr. Kim, he said during the post-battle briefing, what are the chances that this deception will work a second time? The xenopsychologist considered the question carefully before responding. The Vorthak cultural psychology makes them vulnerable to this specific type of misdirection, but they are not stupid. If we try the exact same approach again, they will be suspicious. However, their rigid military thinking means they will expect us to behave the same way in future conflicts. She pulled up displays showing intercepted Vorthak communications from the past few hours. Their survivors are already developing new, tactical doctrines based on what they think they learned. They believe human technology is unreliable, but occasionally produces unexpected results. They are planning to bring more ships next time to compensate for the possibility of equipment malfunctions. Captain Park understood the implications immediately. So they will come back with a larger fleet, but they will still be planning to fight the same enemy they think they face today. Exactly, Dr. Kim replied. Which gives us opportunities to surprise them in different ways. The strategic situation had fundamentally changed in humanity's favor. The Vorthak still possessed overwhelming military superiority, but they no longer understood their enemy. Every assumption they made about human capabilities was based on carefully crafted deceptions, rather than accurate intelligence. Future battles would be fought against aliens who thought they knew what to expect, but were actually operating with completely false information. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Captain Park stood on the bridge of her new command ship and watched a convoy of vessels departing Earth orbit. To any observer, they appeared to be the same desperate refugee transports that had fled during the invasion. Their hulls were scarred and patched, their engines seemed to barely function, and their communications were filled with the chatter of families hoping to find safety among the stars. The reality was far different. Each ship carried advanced sensor, equipment hidden within fake cargo containers. Their crews were highly trained intelligence operatives disguised as civilian refugees. Most importantly, their true mission was not to flee from alien space, but to infiltrate it and gather information about Vorthak military installations throughout the galaxy. Status report from the convoy, she requested. All ships are maintaining their civilian profiles, her communications officer replied. The Vorthak patrol that just scanned them classified them as harmless refugees and granted permission to pass through their territory. Admiral Cho had established what he called the Department of Strategic Misdirection with Dr. Kim as its director. The new organization was responsible for maintaining and expanding the deception that had saved Earth. Their mission was to ensure that humanity always appeared weaker than they actually were, while secretly becoming stronger than anyone suspected. The human refugees that began appearing in alien space over the following months looked exactly like what the Vorthak expected to see. They were the scattered survivors of a species that had barely escaped extinction. Their ships were primitive, and their technology was unreliable. Most importantly, they posed no threat to galactic civilization and could be safely ignored. None of the alien powers noticed that these refugees always seemed to appear near important military installations or along critical supply routes. Their primitive sensors were actually sophisticated intelligence-gathering systems that mapped every defense and recorded every communication. The humans were not fleeing from their enemies, but studying them in preparation for the next phase of their expansion into space. Lieutenant Nam commanded one of the refugee ships as it drifted past a Vorthak fortress system.